Welcome back, everybody, to another reaction video. I'm actually recording this at night. It's going to be for tomorrow on Saturday, so you guys will be watching this the next day because I am going to be at a soccer tournament with my eldest son all day in Canton, Ohio at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Seems a little strange. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is where we're going for the soccer tournament, but that's what we're doing. So two different kinds of football mixing there. But I'll be there all day, but I wanted to make sure I got some content up. And because we're going to be in Canton and we've got about 4 hours between our games, I thought my son and I would go over and make a little visit to the grave of William McKinley. William McKinley was born in Niles, Ohio, which is actually the town that 3 of my 4 grandparents grew up in. Their families came from Kentucky to Niles to work at a brickyard. My grandmother, the one who didn't grow up in Niles, her father did grow up in Niles. So it's kind of a hometown for me. My wife is from Niles. That's the birthplace of William McKinley, but he lived his adult life, most of it, in Canton, and that's where he's buried. So my son and I are going to visit his grave tomorrow. We'll do some video for the channel, so you can be watching for that sometime in the next couple of weeks. But a lot of you have been recommending to me for a while that I dive into Salmonella's videos, and I know the popular one, the one I've actually seen, is the one on terrare, and we will get to that one at some point. But I wanted to dive into a topic I knew a little more about first. So we're going to look at his video about the assassin of James Garfield, who was another Ohio president who was assassinated. My son's actually got a track meet in Menor, Ohio, which is up on Lake Erie outside of Cleveland. That's where Garfield's home is. So we'll probably dive into that one as well, his life a little bit. But for now, let's dive into Salmonella's video on the assassin of James Garfield.
Who gained massive notoriety by killing one of history's famous leaders.
This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Hey kids, John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald, Hitler, all people who gained massive notoriety by killing one of history's famous leaders. But there are 2 Americans who committed an equally heinous crime as these 3, yet their stories are seldom remembered, mostly because nobody really cares about the presidents they killed.
I wouldn't say nobody cares. I just, comparatively speaking, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are more popular, more well-known than James Garfield and William McKinley, but being an Ohioan, those are the 2 that we care about the most, because those are the 2 from Northeast Ohio. So I grew up learning a lot about Charles Guiteau and Leon Czolgosz.
Originally I was going to talk about both of them, but the video ended up being way too long. So today we'll just stick to, this one, I guess. Charles J. Guiteau was a pretty silly guy. And to understand how a guy could be so silly, you gotta start with his youth. Guiteau was born in Freeport, Illinois in 1841. His mom had postpartum psychosis and died when he was 7, alongside 3 of his 5 siblings. His dad, meanwhile, was mega religious and made a big point out of instilling those values in his son, often physically. This influence molded Charles into a boy who sought nothing short of total approval from others and who would react very harshly to any criticism levied upon him.
And that's important because the mental health issues that Charles Guiteau obviously grows up with, approval becomes a big part of it, because he ends up finding himself in a situation where he is trying to gain the approval of the Garfield administration, and he thinks he's owed something for the little tiny bit he did, or that he thinks he did, to help get Garfield elected.
As a teen, he moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan for high school. He tried to get into the University of Michigan, but he goofed on the entrance exam. So he did what anyone in his situation would do and said, well, so much for real life. I'm going to join a commune. Specifically, he became part of the Oneida community in New York. In some aspects, this place was a pretty run-of-the-mill religious fellowship. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need, yada yada. But there were a couple of things that made it special. First off, they followed a doctrine known as Christian perfectionism, whereby everyone would strive to live their lives completely free of sin and reach a divine level of perfection while still on earth. Now this isn't really unique to Oneida, but whereas most people would achieve this through staunch discipline and careful self-reflection, these guys would just get together and take turns roasting the shit out of each and every member over any minute flaw they could possibly have. Real
I didn't know
for the
that.
psyche. They also practiced what was basically an early form of eugenics, where aspiring parents would have to submit an application and be judged by the committee on their moral and spiritual fortitude.
And this is a time when eugenics is starting to become a thing. It's a thing here in the United States. Margaret Sanger was really into eugenics, although she comes a little bit later. Obviously, what happens in Germany in the 1920s and 30s has a lot to do with eugenics. So this is not unique to any one place.
They were allowed to mate. Children would be separated from the mom about a year after birth and raised communally in the children's wing. After all, wouldn't want any of those hopelessly flawed toddlers to think they're deserving of any affection whatsoever. Oneida also believed in what they called free love, which meant that anyone could bang anyone at any time, as long as they kept it hetero, and exclusive relationships of any kind were actually frowned upon.
Which is really interesting to me, because if you're practicing Christian perfection, and the Bible pretty explicitly states that sex outside of marriage is sinful, as is the case with a lot of cults, they pick and choose the parts that they want to follow for the sake of being able to get away with certain things. And in this case, obviously, they wanted to be able to do the free love thing, so they conveniently ignored that part.
Which seems like kind of a weird habit for people trying to 100% FC this whole Christianity thing, but whatever. Yep. But wait, you're saying, how can you have selective breeding at the same time as extremely unselective breeding? Aha, see, that's where male continence comes in. Under this rule, a pair could go at it for as long as they wanted, with the caveat that the dude's not allowed to nut, full out or otherwise. That way, it's not a sin. After all, as the Bible says, if the dick don't spit, you must acquit. Paradoxically, no such rule exists for the women. In fact, not only did the Commune believe in female orgasms, they actually prioritized them, which is like unheard of in the 19th century. They'd even have the middle-aged women of the society train the teen boys in the art of holding in the old pelvic sneeze. That way, there wouldn't be any chance of conception in case the guy goofs up his first few tries.
I feel like we're spending a little too much time on this topic. Let's move on, shall we?
So anyway, young Guiteau joins this whole thing, and endured countless blows to his massive yet fragile ego, thinking he's at least going to get a piece of this communal action. Except, the criticism towards him wasn't just a formality like it was for others. Everyone there genuinely fucking hated him, on account of the fact that he was a raving neurotic narcissist. He never caught a single piece of this allegedly free love, and after a while, they all started calling him Charles Get Out in the hopes that he'd leave. This is real.
Is that true?
5 long years of this abuse.
All right, I gotta look that up, because I don't know if that's true or if that's just some joke he's making, but we've got to find out. Okay, so it actually comes from Sarah Vowell's book, Assassination Vacation, which I read many years ago. I just don't remember that. So it says, the leader of the Oneida Collective, John Humphrey Noyes, shared his concerns by writing to Guiteau's father, I have no ill will towards Charles. I regard him as insane, and I prayed for him last night as sincerely as I ever prayed for my own son that is now in a lunatic asylum. Okay, so I guess it was a thing. I honestly don't remember reading that in that book, which is a very interesting book, by the way.
Guiteau finally got the hint and moved to New Jersey. He tried starting a newspaper themed around the Oneida religion called the Daily Theocrat, except nobody cared, so that failed. He went back to Oneida and tried to sue the place in order to get back pay for all his voluntary unpaid labor while living there, but apparently I'm mad butthurt isn't a valid reason for prosecution.
And this is an important thing to notice, because he goes there demanding what he thinks he's owed. And this is a theme in Charles Guiteau's life, and this is what will cause him to go after Garfield, is when he doesn't think he receives what he's owed by the president.
So that went nowhere. Finally he said, well, when your devotion to God has failed you, there's only one path in life left. Time to become a lawyer. He managed to pass an examination to gain admission to the Illinois bar, and subsequently joined a law firm in Chicago at the age of 27, where he met his soon-to-be wife, one Annie Bunn. Of course, Guiteau never really got to be a lawyer. He only argued in one actual court case. Most of his time was spent doing bill collection for random clients. This job gave him insight into how debtors think and operate, which allowed him to turn into quite the con man, dodging bills whenever and wherever he saw the opportunity. Even on the job, he'd frequently charge exorbitant contingency fees after the fact, upwards of 75%. And sometimes he'd just keep it all and completely ghost his clients.
Which, again, goes to the whole narcissism thing. He thinks he's owed these crazy fees because of the great service he thinks he's providing.
After all, what are they going to do? Send another bill collector? Well, it turns out they did, so Guiteau and his wife fled to New York. Here he ditched law and started getting into politics. Specifically, he wrote and delivered a speech in favor of Horace Greeley, the 1872 Democratic presidential candidate. And he somehow got it in his head that if Greeley won, his campaign would be so greatly indebted to him that they'd fulfill his desires to be the Minister of Chile.
Interesting, because Greeley's a Democrat. Greeley's running against Ulysses S. Grant for his second term. And again, I did so much for you, you owe me, becomes the theme in 1880.
As though a total rando like him could just, name a job and it would be his. In reality, the speech was an incoherent mess heard by next to no one, and Greeley lost by a landslide. As the years passed, Annie got real sick of living life on the run with a broke-ass bitch, and Charles was none too keen on her weighing him down either. But back in the day, you couldn't just divorce someone willy-nilly, you needed a valid reason for it. So Charles concocted the brilliant scheme of banging a prostitute and then having her testify in court. The plan worked, with the pair successfully divorcing in 1874. And the only downside was syphilis. Whoops. Guiteau started dabbling in theology again.
And syphilis will cause insanity in end-stage syphilis. It happened to Al Capone, I think. So not that this guy needs any more insanity in his life.
Around this time, he published a book called The Truth, which was almost entirely plagiarized directly from John Noyes, the founder of the Oneida community. But despite being a man of God, Guiteau was still very much a two-time environment, and moved frequently in the dead of night to keep collectors off his tail. His brother caught wind of this and wrote him a letter basically saying, hey, maybe you should pay your bills now and then so you can be, a functioning member of society. To which Charles replied, and I quote, "Find $7 enclosed, stick it up your bunghole and wipe your nose on it, and that will remind you of the estimation in which you are held by Charles J. Guiteau."
That he cannot have said the word bunghole in that letter. All right, pulling out the glasses, we got to look this up because I want so badly to believe that this is true. Okay, this website is touringohio.com, and here is the letter. Find $7 enclosed, stick it up your bunghole, and wipe your nose on it, and that will remind you of the estimation in which you are held by Charles J. Guiteau. Sign and return the enclosed receipt, and I will send you the money, but not before. And that, I hope, will end our acquaintance. There's another one here. He now had the background of the sincerity to successfully pull off this new image. Is there a hell? 50 deceived people believe that there ought to be. Charles J. Guiteau, if such really is his name, has fraud and imbecility plainly stamped on his face. The impudent scoundrel talked only 15 minutes and suddenly thanked the audience for their attention and bid them good night. Before the astounded 50 had recovered from their amazement, he had taken their money and fled the building and escaped. Holy cow. I feel like I want to learn more about this guy. I always knew the story of what happened when he assassinated Garfield, but I didn't know this much of his backstory.
God damn, and to his own brother, the madman. Soon after he got arrested, bailed out by his sister, lived with her for a few months, attacked her with an axe, went to DC, rambled about religion to anyone who would listen, moved to Boston, got in a boat accident where everyone in his boat was fine, but everyone in the other one fucking died, took this as a sign from God, moved back to New York, and got back into politics in 1880, this time as a Republican.
I feel like somewhere, now I understand this is the 1870s and our understanding of mental health is way different now than it was 140 years ago. I feel like somebody somewhere along the line, in particular maybe family members, should have recognized that this guy needed to be institutionalized somewhere and failed a lot of people because of it.
During this campaign, there were two main factions of Republicans, known as the Stalwarts and the Half-Breeds, which sounds like some Tolkien shit, wish we had names like that today. Now, Guiteau considered himself a stalwart, and in a similar vein to his 1872 venture, he wrote a speech to promote stalwart candidate Ulysses S. Grant, who was shooting for his third term. But before he got a chance to deliver the speech, one James A. Garfield took the candidacy completely out of nowhere, beating out both factions single-handedly.
So Garfield is a really fascinating guy, and I really honestly really believe with all my heart that had he lived, could have gone down in history as one of our best presidents. He was certainly one of our most intelligent presidents. Off the charts intelligent. He was I think he was the president of Hiram University. He could write Greek with one hand and Latin with the other at the same time. Something about the way his brain was wired was just fascinating. He was a general during the Civil War. A couple of my ancestors actually served under him in Kentucky. Ends up serving in the House of Representatives. I think he was the House Minority Leader at one time. He had actually been elected to be Ohio's next senator in 1880 when he ends up getting elected president. And so didn't really ever serve in the Senate because he ended up getting the presidency instead. Wins a very narrow election against Winfield Scott Hancock, who was another Civil War general, a Democrat. Fascinating story.
He was like, rats, how am I going to get power handed to me now? So he literally just scribbled out all the references to Grant and replaced them with Garfield and was like, yep, that'll do it. He read this speech all of twice, along with handing out copies to the Republican National Committee. In reality, this really didn't accomplish much, but when Garfield managed to win the election, Guiteau was like, yes, that was entirely me. Garfield is in my supreme debt. As God is my witness, he shall make me a consulate in Vienna or Paris or someplace cool like that. He went to DC to await his inevitable appointment, but obviously nothing happened. So he started writing letters. A lot of letters. When that didn't work, he started actually stalking both Garfield and the Secretary of State, James Blaine, intercepting them in hotel lobbies, just being like, oh hey, yeah, it's me, the sole person responsible for your success. Say, how about a consulship? Alright, you'll get back to me, I get it. Whoa, haha. What a coincidence. Me again.
I think he actually goes into the White House a few times as well. I mean, he was legit stalking people. I think Blaine finally had enough and dealt with him, but that didn't stop it.
How's that consulship coming? At first they simply ignored him, but eventually Blaine snapped, screaming, never speak to me again on the Paris consulship as long as you live. Damn you, Garfield! That's a disturbance in the force. Maybe daylight savings just made Monday an hour longer. Wow, Garfield, that was quite the wisecrack. It's amazing how you manage to keep things fresh year after year. Burn in hell, beige dog. At this point, Guiteau completely renounced any faith in the current administration, and after a lifetime of clout chasing met only with disappointment, he decided his only option was straight up going postal. He convinced himself that it was now God's will to remove Garfield from this mortal plane in order to put his stalwart vice president, Chester Alan Arthur, into power.
So, for some of our younger viewers, you might not recognize that term going postal. Back in, I think, the 80s, I was a kid at the time, there were a couple of really well-publicized instances of mass shootings in postal facilities. And you got to remember that before this current last 20 years or so, mass shootings didn't happen. They did happen. They didn't happen all that often. And they certainly weren't in the news as much as they were then. So these were pretty big deals at the time. And so the term going postal became synonymous with someone who just kind of snaps and, you know, does something horrible.
When he went to buy a revolver, he was given the choice between a wood grip and an ivory grip. He went with the ivory one for no other reason than he thought it would look cooler in a museum.
Yep.
And on July 2nd, 1881, he ambushed Garfield at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station, shooting him twice in the back and mortally wounding him, all because he wouldn't give him a job.
And walking with Garfield was his Secretary of War, Robert Todd Lincoln. And Robert Todd Lincoln was in D.C. when his father was assassinated, though he wasn't present at the assassination. He's with Garfield when Garfield is shot. And he's in Buffalo, New York, I think either in the same building or like the next building over from McKinley when McKinley is shot at the Pan American Exposition. After which he swore he would never attend another presidential function. And I think that was largely true until the opening of the Lincoln Memorial, which was attended by Warren G. Harding, And Warren G. Harding died, I think the following year, died in office. He wasn't assassinated, but died the following year in office. Lincoln, I think, was either dead or certainly wasn't present when that happened. Harding died in San Francisco. But you can imagine how that must have felt. All three of the assassinations that happened in Robert Todd Lincoln's lifetime, he's within a couple blocks of or legit present for. I can't imagine what that must have done to the guy.
Garfield managed to hang on for 11 weeks before finally dying, which sounds like hell. Today's modern physicians actually believe that Garfield could have easily survived the incident if it weren't for doctors digging through him with unsanitized tools.
That's true, and actually Guiteau used that as a defense. That, hey, I didn't kill him. I shot him, but he would have been fine. The doctors killed him. The bullet had actually lodged, I think, somewhere near his spine, and his body had actually created a cyst around it. And so if the doctors had done nothing but patch him up and nothing else, he probably would have healed and been okay. They've got him laying on this bed that's got metal springs in it, and they bring in a metal detector trying to find the bullet, and they can't find it. Surprise, surprise. They dig around, and they make this wound gaping and festering, and he starts dying eventually of an infection. Infection's actually what killed McKinley, too, but it wasn't because the doctors did anything. It was just sepsis and, I think, gangrene that killed McKinley. But yeah, he lives for 11 weeks, and you can imagine what that must have been like for him.
Hey, modern medicine, thanks for not being worse than literally no medicine. It means a lot. But that didn't stop Guiteau from being formally charged with murder. And that's exactly what he wanted. Matter of fact, Guiteau was over the moon, taking his new nationwide infamy as the fame he always deserved.
I think he read like a rambling poem either at his sentencing or at his hanging. Maybe they'll mention that.
His trial was just bananas, with Guiteau hurling obscenities at just about everyone there,
Thomas the Skank Engine,
team, and formatting his testimony as an epic poem, which he recited in full. He even dictated an autobiography to the New York Herald, which, get this, he ended with a personal ad for a nice Christian lady under 30 years of age. What a baller. When the guilty verdict was read, he called everybody there low consummate jackasses, and on June 30th, 1882, Guiteau smiled and waved to his adoring fans as he was walked to the gallows, where he recited a repetitive, deranged poem he wrote that morning, which was performed in a high-pitched falsetto voice, since it was written in the point of view of a child.
Can you even imagine this? Picture this, and I shouldn't be laughing. It's not funny. James Garfield was a good man who didn't deserve to die. But this dude gets up there. He's about to be hanged. And he's like, la, 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 and he's singing this thing to people. Could you imagine what must have been going through people's minds? It must have been peace for this guy to finally be off the planet.
He asked for a full orchestra to play during the reading, which I don't have to tell you that went nowhere. And promptly thereafter, he was hung. When the gallows dropped, people were probably like, oh, Jesus.
I get anal about this, but it is hung sounds like proper English, but when you're talking about someone being executed, it is actually hanged. That is the proper term.
It's finally over. I just came here for a nice little execution. They subject me to all that. I want my money back, frankly. So it just goes to show, you can't always get what you want. Unless that thing is getting everyone to hate you. That's extraordinarily easy. But for everything else, you're gonna need a combination of hard work and know-how. While the former must ultimately come from within, there's plenty of resources out there for the latter. The best of which is a seldom talked about little startup called Skillshare.
So he's gonna finish with his ad, and I encourage you to click on the link in the description below and check out his full video, and you can see the ads and everything too for Skillshare, which I use, by the way. Yeah, that was fascinating, and I actually learned a couple of things I didn't already know about all that. I keep wanting to, and I just can't find the time, but I do want to get up to Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland, which is full of star power as far as history goes. James Garfield's there, Elliot Ness is there, Ray Chapman is there, who was a Cleveland Indians player who was killed by a pitch playing against the New York Yankees. There's a lot of other people there as well. John D. Rockefeller is there. And more. So that's a place I definitely want to get to visit sometime soon. But tomorrow, while you're watching this video, I will be in Canton visiting McKinley's grave. And I'll probably throw into that video my visit a couple of years ago to the site of his assassination, which is now on a median in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Buffalo. So check those things out, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.